there are several structures.
I'm not much of a picture taker, but this thing is
Okay, let's see, Institute of European Studies, right?
Yep, correct.
And are you actually doing a specific class?
No.
No.
We did.
We did that.
We did.
Wow, wonderful. Is that just so fun for you? To have it right here. Oh my gosh, so you actually remember even coming to this building as a student?
No.
I don't. No, I talked to, yes, no, there are some people that did.
Here in the 60s, yeah. Okay, well, welcome on behalf of the American Embassy and certainly the U.S. State Department, which is the owner of this property. And we've owned it since 1950, just after the war. We are now still in the building, and Robin Smith, who was just speaking to you, manages what we call the George C. Marshall Center, which is a series of 10 reception rooms on the étage noble that we use for official embassy events. Now, this building used to be our consulate building for many years until 9/11, and then a specific study that was done for ballistics, and it was decided that we were really too close to the Rue de Rivoli to provide what the government requires as proper setback for a safe government building. So at that point, the decision was made to remove our consulate from this building. The only thing is, we were right in the throes of a big restoration project where we had actually received private funds to complete. So the decision was made not to sell the building. It's got too much history and wonderful architectural, social, political history, economic. So we found an arrangement. A private law firm, which is Jones Day, is actually occupying, and it's a really good arrangement in the sense that they came in and said, we will do a full renovation of your office spaces in this building. We're taking them up to Class A office space. The government wouldn't have done that for a long time. So there's the good side of the deal for us and for this building. Then, in that very deal, we also said we will retain the management and the use of our 10 reception rooms that have been beautifully restored thanks to the generosity of Americans and Europeans to make that happen. And we'll continue our relationship with our European partners in those rooms. And we also will provide space, they're renting it of course, for the World Monuments Fund European offices. Now, who knows the World Monuments Fund? You might have heard of this organization. It's American based. Been around for a good 50 years, I think, maybe less. They actually restore and conserve properties around the world. They're really exceptional. It's out of New York City, but their European headquarters were here in Paris, and so now they're in this building as well. So Jones Day, the U.S. government, and the World Monuments Fund are able to use the spaces, the spaces we're going to see today, for official events. What we're going to do is just tell you a little bit, because were you studying architecture? Were you studying
Everything.
Everything. Okay, well, we're just going to kind of give you a panoply then, a quick walkthrough of the history of the time that this building was built and kind of some of the beautiful architectural things that were done here and that have been conserved now. We're going to talk about the things that happened, the different owners, because it had a life of over almost 250 years now, so they've had different owners, and some of them quite illustrious. We're going to talk a little bit about them. And then we're going to talk about how the U.S. government has used the building since post-war time up until now, and how we use it today. So just here, this is a good place to give you the idea, the background about the history of the building, because you're seeing kind of the way it was built. And we're talking 1767 to 1769 was the period of construction. Now, to situate Paris at that time, up until about the 1750s, Paris pretty much stopped at the end of the Tuileries Gardens. You had spaces and you had development, but it wasn't much. A small group of people convinced Louis XV that his legacy should be the Place Louis XV. And it will be something very different, because until then, Paris is small little streets and tiny little buildings, and for now, we're going to do a large place. There'll be only buildings on one side of it. There'll be a monumental statue in the middle of Louis XV on the horseback. and that will be his legacy to the rest. And then, of course, so he bought into that, said, all right, gave his architect, Jacques Gabriel, full reign of the project. That began with the two big buildings that you see on the Place de la Concorde when you look at it from the other side of the bridge. Those were what they called, it was almost like the warehouse of the king. Those were the first official buildings on the site. Then the Comte Saint-Florentin, who had been in that small group of people convincing him, was able to actually build his home here on this site. So we're talking about the Comte Saint-Florentin, very top minister under Louis XV, in the close inner circle, dinners in his private apartment, that type inner circle. The Comte Saint-Florentin was also in charge of the administration of Paris and of Versailles. So, and among other responsibilities, but those were key in terms of thinking of the architectural changes he was bringing about. So he also got to benefit from the king's architect, Jacques Gabriel, and of course all of the king's artisans who were focusing on this area and making it the best that it could be. So thus today, we have a beautiful, beautiful building with lots of things, even dating back to that time, that were original. So you'll see some real craftsmanship, you'll see some real artisan work, and the things that we've tried to restore and bring back to that period. The story goes on. The Comte Saint-Florentin only lives here until 1777. When he dies, a really important inventory, because he's such an important man, an inventory was done, very detailed, telling us everything that was in his apartment and in the building, actually. That detail was going to be what we were going to use in the year 2000 when we started to restore the property. Very important, but it takes interpretation, it takes working with French specialists. I mean, what is the green damask in 1769? So we worked with the Louvre, the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, and some very important French specialists to make sure we were doing the right thing. When he dies, the house kind of goes through a couple different ownerships until the next illustrious owner, which was Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord, a French statesman, lived through 5 different regimes of the government, enacted many of them, making them happen, saw the royalty in power, saw the royalty leaving power, still maintained a position in the government through all of that, through the Directoire, through the Conseil, and all the way into Louis XVIII coming back onto the throne. So this was an amazing statesman.
Yeah.
Yes. Really.
He didn't lose his head.
And didn't lose his head. And a funny quote. A funny quote about Comte Saint-Florentin, but that also tells you about Talleyrand. Comte Saint-Florentin, what was said of him was he was a man that wore many titles, none of which he left behind. Talleyrand, on the other hand, was someone who really, there were various things said of him. One thing that was said of him was that he, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something that said, diplomacy is the ability to see change and enact its happening. So he was very visionary, and he knew how to maneuver and get the people to do what he needed to do. Talleyrand lived here from 1812 to 1838 when he died in the building. So we've got lots of ghosts here. 1838, Charles Maurice de Tallyrand dies. The home then is sold to a very wealthy, prominent family, the Rothschild family. James Mayer de Rothschild purchases this building, and they're starting to buy up several things in Paris, and that family is gaining in power, certainly in real estate, but also in financial power, banking firm, providing funds at times of war and all sorts of things. So they really have developed a position, and they're very cultured and very artistic. They also, bring together in these properties a massive collection of art, of artifacts of the top quality. And the American government is very fortunate that the Rothschild family owned this property, and they've also owned what we use today as the ambassador's residence. So again, these properties were well cared for. They had the finest of the finest in terms of decors and objects. The Rothschild family will stay in the property, passing it through generations until World War II. they're a very prominent Jewish community, so their place is not in Paris during the time, or even in France during the time, that troubled time, World War II. So they are going to leave. The home is going to be requisitioned by the French government. They are then going to pass it over to the Germans, and the German marine forces are going to move into this building. It's very strategic because just across the way we have the French marine forces, and that's true today. That is the head of the Ministère de la Marine. So we've got the Germans in here. Up until the liberation of Paris, 1944, August 1944, we know, yes?
Did the Rothschild leave voluntarily, or were they arrested and deported?
No, they left.
Where did they go?
They left. I mean, I say they. It was a big family. There might have been some that might have been deported, but my understanding was that they went to the United States, and in fact, some of them have even stayed in the United States. Where did they go? They went to. That's where I know mostly that they went to the United States, but I'm sure there was a path to get there and all kinds of things. But we're talking about a big family. So the ones that carried this, James Mayer, and by this time now we're down into Edouard Rothschild, who lived in this building. Now Edouard has a massive collection of art, beautiful pieces. He's got Vermeers, he's got, what is the other, Rubens. He's got a whole room where he's placed several Rubens.
Van Dyck's?
I'm sorry?
Van Dyck's?
Van Dyck, he probably, yes, I'm sure he had Van Dyck, I'm sure he did. And so the collection, some of it is taken out by the Rothschild, some of it's left, and we actually did a trace and found out when the movie Monuments Men came out, we found out that Vermeer, the astronomer that they focused in on, was actually taken off the wall in this building. It was then, yes, it was then given back to the family in 1945, which I thought was wonderful this year, given back to the family, and then, believe it or not, the family gave it to the French government in a program called Dation, where if you owe a lot of taxes to the government, you can give a piece of property or an object that has a large value, and then that will credit your tax credit. So, or your tax debt, excuse me. So, Rothschilds have left, Germans were in. Germans have left because we've liberated the city, and the house is empty. It's empty for a while. The Rothschilds have not come back right away. The United States government turns to the French government and says, we want to come in and help you in a big way, reconstruct the economic situation, not only in France, but in Europe. You know, we've got some ideas about this. We're bringing a lot of staff over. We need office space. And they suggest that we move into this building. So we moved in and actually rented it from 47 to 1950, at which time our government approved that we purchase it from the Rothschild family. So we purchased the building in 1950. It was a beehive of activity.
How much did we pay?
I'm sorry?
How much did we pay?
I have seen, and that's the question that comes up, I think it was $720,000. I have seen. But I have to look back at that because at the same time we were buying other buildings too. I mean, in 1928, which was before that time, we purchased the land where our current embassy is, and that was over $1,200,000. So, you know,
obviously
it was
Congress was
post-war.
not gridlocked.
Was not gridlocked. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so where are we? So we come in here. We set up offices. Who saw Julie and Julia? The film Julie and Julia. We did. So what is her name? That Meryl Streep played Julia Childs. Julia Child's husband is part of that effort. His offices are in this building. She's working apparently in the lunchroom down on the main floor. So lots of fun to think about that time. 1950, we're going on now. We stay, really the real main Marshall Plan effort actually is administered between 47 and 52. That's when our government was really trying to help set the groundwork and working with all the 17 nations. many of those meetings took place in this building. That hard work that was done of trying to change their mindset from being warring nations to nations that we could actually imagine coal services and all kinds of transport services that would be running. So a European vision was coming about. So again, we're doing that. We're here in the building. We're basically using it as offices. So the actual beautiful decors we're going to see today, many of them just painted in white, just get down to business. Some of the offices that will be in, some of the spaces, actually Averil Harriman, who was the president's representative for that effort, his offices were up in this area and actually looking out on the Place de la Concorde. Wonderful story about the Mobilier National, who actually loaned furniture for those offices and for the meeting rooms that we had set up here. So there was great cooperation between France and the United States at that time. The building is going to remain in our hands in the 70s. We're going to move and 70s and early 80s. We're going to transform it into our consulate building. We do a major kind of renovation of all the electricity and some kind of aesthetics. And we have a consulate building here for up until 2008, actually. I think we finally moved out and moved it over. I think that's enough for the history. We're back at his time, and I want to show you this space, because we have a lot of the things that actually he commissioned and had done in here. Now, I want to point out these two little boys here in these niches. These are beautiful 18th century statues, Etienne Bois. They actually sat up in these niches out here in the courtyard. We were asked by the Monument Historique inside in the 80s, when we did that big electrical renovation of the building. And so we created these niches. So these niches here would not have been here. But the stairwell, particularly the railing ramp, which was recently photographed and studied in a 18th century ornamentation, that is original. Now, when it was done, it was in what we call a gun color, painted in gray, and black and bronze, which is gray and bronze. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful piece, and one that we're very proud of. And the other one that we're very proud of is looking up here. It's this beautiful ceiling. And this ceiling is commissioned by Jean-Simon Berthelemy. Berthelemy had won the Prix de Rome, which is a very, very prestigious prize. It allows for an artisan to go to Rome and study for a year their craft. So he went, and he had just come back to France, and the Conseil Florentin commissioned him to do this. And of course, the Conseil Florentin is a minister, so he wants to do something to really glorify the position of France. So we have two figures. We have force and prudence are the two figures that are carrying this globe of France. It's the globe representing France with the fleur-de-lis, of course, the national fleur-de-lis royal symbol. And they're carrying this up to glory for eternity. And you've got the symbols of eternity, the ring and the pyramid. And all of this is being announced to all of the universe by La Renommée, who is over here on the other side. So this is, the glory of France, a position of power forever is basically what we're looking at. When it was done, it was actually written up in the newspapers as being, when you came into this building, it was as if you were just looking up to the sky. So you didn't have what we now have, those shadows and this chain kind of blocking our appreciation of it. But it still is a beautiful piece. He signed it and dated it. He also then asked that, again, being a man of great knowledge, that all of these different knowledge, as well as artistic forms, be represented around it. So you have astronomy, you have painting, you have music, you have poetry. So, all of the things kind of that a well-educated minister of the government would be fully aware of and fully recognized. So, we're now in this place, and we're going to chose vue at the time of the death of the the time of the death of Talleyrand. And it's really an interesting quote. It's actually it was written by Victor Hugo at the time of the death of Tallyrand. If I can get my hand on it, I will read it to you. Here it is, Choses Vues. Talking about the period 1830 to 1848. 38, actually. Victor Hugo wrote, "Into this palace, as a spider into its web, he enticed and captured one by one heroes, thinkers, conquerors, princes, emperors, Bonaparte, Sieyès, Madame de Staël, Chateaubriand, Benjamin Constant, Alexandre de Russie, Guillaume de Prusse, François d'Autriche, Louis XVIII, Louis Philippe, and all the gilded, glittering flies which buzz through the history of these past 40 years." Well written. And yeah, as being the architect for the exterior of the building, then we also have an important architect, interior designer. They didn't have that title at that time, but they actually was in charge of all of the interiors and the work done by the artisans. And his name was Jean-François Thérèse Chalgrin. Chalgrin. So Chalgrin is going to be the one making the decisions about the interiors and the decors. I mentioned the two statues, and those are Étienne Pierre-André Gois, which I mentioned. And then I didn't point out, but I should have. When you leave, you can take a peek. There's two beautiful sculpted lions adorning the front entrance. Those two are from François-Joseph Duret. So names that were quite important at that time in terms of artisans. So we're now into what we're calling George C. Marshall Center. This is what the appartement de parade, d'apparat appearance, reception rooms of all of the different owners of the building. So no one actually really lived in these spaces. They were always considered like your living room, your reception area. The Rothschilds really are the only ones after the Comte Saint-Florentin to make some major changes in the building. And when I say major, they actually are going to add a whole wing onto the building. So we're talking now, their period is the late 19th century, that they're going to start making these changes, 1860s, 1870s. So we are going to, as we go through the apartment, we're going to go through the 18th century rooms, and then we'll end up in that wing that was added on. When we did the project for the restoration program, we had to make decisions because of those transformations that the Rothschild had done, one of them being in this room. In the 18th century, this would have been a stone floor. It would have been probably a plain colored room with tapestries. It's basically kind of your basic entryway. So the Rothschilds obviously did the parquet floors. They did, and they actually did this marble decor that we're looking at. We're looking at part of it that's actually true marble, and the rest of it is a faux marble that we actually just did recently during the restoration. So everything above this chair rail is real marble. Everything below is the artisan's faux marble. Also in this room, and it was depicting of their stature, their wealth, they even did faux bois finishes on the doors to make them look even more luxurious wood than maybe they were. So this room and the next two antechambers are all in a period of 19th century. The choice was made to only go back to the Rothschild time in these rooms, whereas in the other rooms we all took it all the way back to the 18th century. I like to point out the restoration project in 2007. We had a significant completion. We weren't completely finished, but we had a good list of donors and people. So we had an important event. It was the 60th anniversary of the Marshall Plan, and so we put up this plaque to honor all of those individuals and organizations that had donated and provided funds for that restoration project up until this point. And we have another plaque that I'll show you at the end that gives all of the large donors. I want to point out, of course, this beautiful portrait of George C. Marshall. This was actually a donation that was given to our embassy in London. And when the ambassador in London came and visited this center and realized the importance of the message of Marshall, he felt that it was much better to have it shown here and on display. So it was sent from London over here, and we're proud to have it as well. Now this is called the Marshall Antechamber, and this is where we just basically explain the vision of Marshall. And then the next two rooms have an exhibit in them that was created at that 60th anniversary of the Marshall Plan and sent around to several American universities just to remind people of the Marshall Plan and really to kind of change the, or at least make good on the notion that it wasn't just American money that was sent over to Europe and kind of bought out their economic recovery. No, not at all. The point of this exhibition is to say that Marshall was the visionary. He made a suggestion in his speech in 1947 at Harvard University that was just picked up by the leaders of Europe at the time, some of the key leaders, and so they said, oh, well, we will provide friendly aid if you all can figure out how to think now in a European way as opposed to individual nations. And so that was the impetus. And that was the instigation, and then it was the importance of the exhibit is to say that it was the Europeans that actually then came around the table and helped move this forward, and we were just helping them, and those meetings taking place a lot in this building. So we'll go into the next room, and then, yes, and that's that way. The Rivoli is running this direction. And we've come in a little stairwell here. We've put our things in this room, we've gone out to the main stairwell, and then we've come back through these antechambers. 19th century decors, 19th century gilding, 19th century fabrics. And we're now going to go into the 18th century part of the building, which is what we call an enfilade. And if you will, the doors that are in between are later, that one would have been there, but these are later additions. You would have had a series of rooms this way and a series of rooms this way, one interacting with each other. Sorry, put my hand in front of it. The building in the 18th century stopped here. So just that wall where we saw those two niches, that was the exterior wall of the 18th century building. So the Rothschilds then took us that way. We'll go into those rooms. So these are 19th century decors, these are 19th century decors, and now we're going to visit some of the 18th century decors here. Okay? Just also on this panel, but we'll also see it over there, extensive restoration. I mean, we took a lot of the things off the walls. The three gentlemen I mentioned, Comte Florentin, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord, and then James Mayer de Rothschild.
This isn't the whole. Isn't the whole building.
No, you're right. This would be duplicated here.
Yeah.
So that it would be a U in the 18th century around the central courtyard that give onto the street. Exactly. Now, and this would be an urban, high-level, aristocratic home. An hôtel particulier is an urban aristocratic home. Is that more clear? Okay.
Thank you.
We have here, he also received the French Legion of Honor, the Nobel Peace Prize, the Aachen Medal of Honor from the city of Aachen, given to people who have been instrumental in helping Europe, the creation of Europe, as well as then the Talleyrand Medal that was created in the 80s for this building. Okay. So you've come into what we call the grand reception room. This would have been the case for the Comte Florentin as well as Talleyrand. It's a beautiful room. It has what we feel is the most beautiful view of Paris. You've got the Eiffel Tower, you've got the Louvre down to the left. You have, of course, the Tuileries Garden here. It's a beautiful glass that we know today as something like de la Concorde. So in this room, this is where, remember I mentioned that green gas that was in the 1777 inventory. Well, this is where we had to ask the question, it's all over that 1777 inventory. Another thing I like to show when we're in this room is, as I said, we worked with French specialists on historic decors when we did this restoration project. And this, if you will, is what the room looked like as we came into it with the notion of trying to do a restoration project. And most of of course, specialists in historic decors were aghast at this. They said, oh,
Quelle horreur!
anything, quelle horreur, exactly, quelle horreur. If you do anything in your restoration project, you must reestablish the architectural integrity of this room. And what that was going to entail was that take the fireplace that the Rothschilds had placed on this wall, bring it back to its original location here, recreate the doors that had been removed, and then reestablish the mirror, the window, and its sculpting here. So it was quite an endeavor. World Monuments Fund that I mentioned earlier, they are one of the champions of this particular work, as well as the Crest Foundation out of New York. So we're really happy to have been able to do that. But what was really fun was that when the French specialists were telling us, we created the door, we moved the fireplace, we all kind of going, what? And so they created a sort of photo montage for us so that we could actually see what we were supposed to be doing and how it would actually look. And believe me, that's a great technique because people are not visionaries. Yeah.
So they just did that with Photoshop?
Photoshopped it. It went from this to say, this is what you need.
Was the original what you had before was rounded?
Yeah, but you actually see still the original, but they had just taken out the mirror. So we were able to do that again, and then we were able to, as I said, recreate the fabrics. The eagles are original to the concept all the time. It's like destiny that we're here. Isn't that now has in their collection. Sadly enough, they're not the actual ones that were here because the dimensions are different. But we're hoping, and we always hold out hope in anything like this, that the actual ones that were here will come up to the surface in a sale, and we'll possibly be able to bring them back here. That is a hope that we do continue to have. We are benefiting from donations from, this is from Claude Serre in London, an English gentleman, no, I think he's French, I'm sorry, but he lived most of his life in England, but recognizing the French government's participation in Europe, he made this beautiful donation. This is a 19th century clock. It's a larger than size one that would be in here, but it's a beautiful, beautiful contribution to our collection, so we're very glad to have that. Let's keep moving into the next room. We're going to go down the enfilade. And I'm going to kind of go quickly, so I'm going to ask you to move quickly. We're in what would have been the office, the state office of the Concept Florentin. And this is that room that I mentioned that Talleyrand was really going to push the envelope in terms of decors and styles, and he's going to move away from the Rococo, from the Louis XV curved edges. He's going to move into a Louis XVI linear straight lines. Decorative things that you would see on the exterior of a building now coming into the interior. And then he's even going to take it one step further. He's not going to do the white and gold that you'll find at Versailles. He's going to go to a gray and gold in that period. About 30 years at the end of the 18th century, that was apparently fashion at that time. So we were able to find enough traces of the gray to be able to recreate it. Now this is glue-based paint. You can't, the finishes, you can't just wash them off. You have to redo the finishes if there are ever any errors or problems with it. We tried as much as possible to use the materials and the techniques of what was used in the 18th century to redo this restoration. So it's really quite extensive. Again, a beautiful mantel clock. Richard Driehaus. If any of you are from Chicago, he has his own museum in Chicago. He's quite an infamous collector of clocks, and he was very kind to donate this one to our cause as well. Something that's interesting for you to see here is we've left a trace of what we were looking at before the restoration. We basically were living in a lot of gunk and pollution right on the Rue de Rivoli. You can imagine over years and years of time. At the time, one of the very first things we did in this building in the 80s was to re-establish the doors and the window doors to be able to avoid all of this pollution coming in.
Did you have to replace all the buildings?
No, they were able to clean a lot of it and really do just patching up. We didn't try and conserve. Yep.
Are the chandeliers anything special about the chandeliers?
No, they're not anything. We're not quite sure. I've never seen the actual prove that they were purchased by the Rothschilds or that they were purchased by the State Department, but it's really more that period. It wouldn't go back further than that. Yeah, these chandeliers. We did